Hi everyone, welcome to our mother and daughter Q&A. We are doing this Q&A on behalf of ANZFAC, the Australian and New Zealand Fontan Advisory Committee. My name is Jessamy and this is Julie, my mum.
Hi.
And for those of you that don't know us, we are from Auckland in New Zealand. Just very briefly, my Fontan journey, I was born with a single ventricle, basically hypoplastic right heart syndrome, with a variety of other defects as well. And my first Fontan was in 1989 when I was 6, and that was the original Fontan procedure. I then had that converted in 2005 to the extracardiac Fontan, which actually made a huge change to my life, but we'll probably get into that a bit later. We've got a lot of questions in. Thank you so much for everyone that asked us some questions, and what we've done is we've sectioned them into, I think it's 8 sections that we've got, so that they kind of flow together, so it's a bit easier for us to answer them. And now I'm going to hand over to Mum to kick it off with tough questions to start with.
So we're starting off with guilt.
Yay!
Do I feel guilty? Did I feel guilty that I had a child with a heart condition? Jessamy wasn't diagnosed until she was 3 months old, unlike many of you, and so I already had a strong bond and connection with her, particularly as she was very unwell in the first 3 months of her life before she was diagnosed. Did I feel guilty? Yes, I did for a little while, I think, but I very soon countered that with putting it together as part of my life journey. And was it what I planned for my life? No, it wasn't. Has it been better? Absolutely, yes. Would I want it any other way? No, I wouldn't. Jessamy hasn't defined my life, but she certainly coloured my life, and she's part of my life journey. I've learned huge amounts from her. I've learned huge amounts from the community that she introduced me to, and that I've helped to develop. I'm not sure where Jess sits with the guilt question. Maybe she can answer that herself.
Well, one of the first questions that we got was a particularly tough one, and they said that I didn't have to answer it, but I will, of course. It was, did I ever feel that I was a burden on my parents? So this might come across as a little bit selfish, but to be really honest, I don't think I ever felt that. Not on my parents. I have gone through times of feeling like a bit of a burden on the health system, because I've needed so much more of the services than maybe other people would have. But probably the one person that I feel like I've been most of a burden on, and he might not enjoy me saying this, but is my brother. I'm sure that he doesn't feel that way, but I'm sure that for him, having a younger sibling with such serious medical conditions, requiring a lot of attention, a lot of hospital stays, getting a lot of positive support from everyone in my life, maybe at times getting away with things that I probably shouldn't have got away with. I think that has probably been quite challenging for him, and I feel a lot of guilt because of that. The next question from the same person was, how have I processed and dealt with those emotions? And yeah, to be honest, that's an ongoing process. These are not emotions that I necessarily felt when I was a child. I think you just kind of deal with what's there at the time, and you, especially with your siblings, we were very close. And that's not something that I would have thought about at the time that I was feeling guilty of, but it's certainly something that's come before much more as I've grown into an adult. And to be honest, also since I've had a kid of my own, that's something that I've thought about even more. And yeah, I'm still just processing, and I think part of it is just making sure that I keep up my relationship with my brother and my parents through that. Sorry, I didn't really give any of that to my parents. Sorry. I think that part, you know, I guess it's because, you know, now that I'm a mum, you have a child, and that is just what you're given. And so maybe I didn't feel like I've been a burden on them, because that's just what they've been given, and you just deal with it. That's just your bag. Okay, so I have some questions here that are specifically for you. The first one is, what has helped you over the years to cope with the CHD journey as a parent?
Well, as a parent, I guess one of the things that I needed, as soon as we left hospital after Jess's first Blaylock surgery, when she was 3 months old, and we were there for about 6 weeks, I think, so that was quite a long time. I was, the prognosis had not been very good. She was not supposed to live past 4, and this was sort of like just a temporary fix. And all I wanted to do was to find other parents and other children, that I could see other children that were older, that, you know, 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds that had the condition that Jess had. The biggest problem was that there wasn't enough information around. That's quite different now, because, you know, with the internet, and the stories that people share, and Facebook and so forth, there's much more easy access to sharing that I didn't have at my time. This was also the beginning of Heart Kids, and because of my search, I actually got very early on involved with Heart Kids, looking to have that need for myself met. The toughest thing was I couldn't find anybody. People didn't sort of really have the same understanding of what their children's conditions were that we actually have now. The outcomes weren't as good. I've since met a good number of people that who didn't have good outcomes. So I'm very grateful for the time that Jessamy was born.
Should I ask you the next one?
Sure.
When I was growing up, what do you wish you had been able to ask another parent regarding the CHD journey? If you could find those parents around you,
what I needed to know, what was going to happen. I guess one of the things that happens is it's so out of your control, and just getting information helps bring that to the fore. So I stalked the library. I got so many medical books out. I mean, like, I could barely understand them myself. But
that's like the 1980s version of
Google. It was going to the library, getting the medical books out, and with my 2-year-old as well. I mean, he spent a lot of time in the library while I was trying to read reference books, and that was a pretty challenging time, I think.
So, what would you have asked? What were you asked? What were you looking for?
I was looking for information. I was looking for diagrams. I was looking for, how can this work? How does this heart work? It's not right. How can it be fixed? Can it be fixed? And at that point in time, it couldn't be. So there were no surgical options for us at that point in time. It was just, and then I guess the big thing was dealing with death. So I really struggled with that, and that was part of getting some control. So I worked a funeral plan out. How bizarre was that? Did you know that? I worked a funeral plan out. I asked a really good friend if he could take the funeral, be the celebrant. He wasn't a celebrant, but I just figured I needed somebody close.
It's getting prepared. Did you have anyone, any other parent that you remember from the time that you talked to or had as a support?
Yes, I began I joined a Heart Kids support group and went to a couple of their support meetings. And basically I got involved from then with Heart Kids.
So that makes me think that it having that support there and people to talk to did help you, because you stayed involved. It wasn't something that you took up for a small amount of time and then let go of. You actually stayed involved in it.
I did, because I did stay involved because that was so important to me, and I thought I could actually help other people with that. And I think that's been part of my journey as well. So I was a teacher to start with, and then I stopped after I had Jess, and she needed so much extra care.
I was a burden. I made her stop her career.
No,
I didn't think about that.
I didn't think about that either.
What sorts of things did you put in place for me growing up to support me, such as school plans, mental health support, sport?
Okay, like I have already said, Jessamy changed the direction of my life, and I actually did quite a lot of therapy for some other stuff. And one of a great teacher I had, she taught me some visualization techniques, and that was one of the things that I think I gave to Jessamy, that to help us through medical procedures and particularly surgery. So I developed with this teacher a visualization plan and technique, which we used right up through all Jessamy's childhood surgeries, and I believe she still used them to some degree as an adult. So I certainly did that. School, kindergarten, school, that was always a process. I made a specific appointment with every new teacher to go and talk to them about Jess's condition, and it wasn't actually just to share her condition. It was about empowering Jess. It was always about empowering Jess. They needed to know what her condition was. They needed to listen to her. And this is one of the biggest challenges, I think, with schools and school teachers and young children, is actually encouraging the children to speak up for themselves, one, and two, them not using their condition to get away with stuff and get out of things. So Jessamy knew the cry wolf story really, really well. And when I went to visit the schools and explained about her condition, I very, very firmly put that she needed to participate. She needed to do as much as she could, and they needed to listen to her, that when she wanted to stop, they needed to enable and allow her to stop. She could just sit down, she could still be there with the other kids doing whatever, but they needed to listen to her, and that was often a challenge. I mean, teachers can be quite bullying. I know that. I learned some stuff. But yeah, so that was really important. When she went, it was easy at primary school. It was somewhat easy at intermediate school, a little bit more challenging. It was much more difficult at secondary school.
I'm sure that a lot of the difficulty comes from the fact that actually, as a child, you don't really want your parents going up and having conversation about you to all of your teachers, as much as you know it might help you in the long run. At the time, I mean, it's just bringing extra attention to you. So I think that's something that you have to be really careful of as a parent when you're having those conversations with the teachers. Just being aware of how the child is actually feeling about that. And
I think the other thing that's really important now in retrospect is trust. You know, your child knows you really, really well. They knew you well way before they could talk to you. They know you emotionally. They read your feelings and so forth. And so trust is really important. So I needed to trust the medical profession, the people that I was dealing with. if I didn't trust them, then how was Jessamy going to trust them? That was something that was really important. So if I was doubtful, I needed to deal with that. So I could go along and I could advocate for her and feel confident that the information that I was getting was okay and right, because Jessamy needed that. So that was really important for me, and I changed my GP because of that. So when I was not trusting my GP and he was not providing what I needed, I went out and looked for another GP, and that was specifically so that we could have a good relationship with them. Jess was 13 at that stage. So
okay, I have a couple more questions for you. I'll put them both together. When I was growing up, what support did you receive, and also how did you deal with stress, worry and trauma?
I mean, that's pretty hard. What support did I receive? That looks like it's what did I get from outside coming in. And I don't remember anything about that, but I remember feeling really grateful that we were in Auckland, and so when I had any concerns about your health, especially your heart health, I went straight to the cardiologist that I was dealing with at clinic appointments. I mean, that was fantastic. I thought we were really lucky. You saw the same doctors, you knew them well, and they knew you well, and I mean that was a huge reassurance. Dealing with stress, worry and trauma, it's a really, really hard time in a family. I think lots of families do really, really struggle. For me personally, I found a good therapist. I was dealing with some other issues, life issues at that time, and I just put them all together, and it was, that's what I needed. I also had some really close friends. They were nothing to do with the heart community, they were just personal close friends, and I could share with them. And a couple of them lived on the other side of the world, but I could share with them. And then family, my siblings, my mum, they were just all there, and they were always there for support, even sometimes maybe too much, and I needed to push them away a bit, but I knew they were always there, so there was that cushioning around me. But therapy, I needed therapy.
Sorry, the burden is sinking in.
Oh, therapy. So now it's my turn to ask some questions here. Jessamy, there's a question for you about transitioning into school life, and I think that's sort of like that 3 different areas. There's primary school, intermediate school and secondary school. And how did you explain your condition to your friends? Did you explain your condition to your friends?
Okay, transitioning into school life. I find it quite difficult to answer this because it's hard to know what's relevant as just a kid going to different new schools, because that's always hard, and what's relevant to specifically to me is having a cardiac problem. So I'll try. I mean, the positive story is that I really loved school. All primary school, intermediate school and high school. I have incredible friends that I have to this day from all 3 of those schools I went to. So in some ways, you know, not hard. School was great. And then in other ways it was really hard. And I've got a lot of quite difficult memories from primary school and intermediate school and high school. And most of that is due to physical appearance, I guess. You know, I think everyone as a kid and as a teenager is very aware of themselves and how similar or mainly different they are to other people, and you know, one of the things that set people with CHD apart from other people is the scars. And so throughout those school years, I did get lots of questions. So this comes into the next question, kind of. I did get lots of questions about, you know, what's that? What's that scar? What's that from? And generally, I would say I've had heart surgery. Once, I remember one of my really good friends now, the first time that he saw my shark bite scar on my back, said, "Oh my God, Jess, it looks like you've been slashed with a knife." And I was like, well, I have, actually. You know, like, that was surgery. It was, yeah, a bit dramatic, but, and there, I have a scar from a drain that is not very far away from my belly button, and I had a big joke with a whole lot of my intermediate school friends that I had a second belly button and things like that, you know, and to me it wasn't actually that funny, but those sorts of kind of laughing along, joking situations did help. I'll just talk about one other challenge. Probably the most challenging thing for me was not my scars though, probably it was my colouring. I'll try not to go too deep into this, but when I was in primary school I gained the nickname Purple Face, which stuck for a long time until I spoke to somebody about it. My brother, actually. I confided in him, he confided in my mum, and mum spoke to the teacher, and then from what the teacher did with my class, that actually helped tremendously, and that nickname got eradicated, and I was incredibly grateful. And the colouring issue stuck with me right through high school as well. I remember, mum will remember this as well, even when I was in, I don't know, 6th form I think, I would go to school in the car, sitting in the front seat of the car with my legs up on the dashboard, because, you know, if I put my legs up then they wouldn't be as pink and purple. And then, of course, you know, as soon as I got out of the car and started walking, all the colour would rush back into them and they'd be back to being normal, my colouring again. And but every little bit that I could try and avoid looking as purple as I could helped. I used to love winter because I got to wear stockings, and I would wear my stockings for as long as I could until, you know, it was too hot. I think I'm waffling, but in terms of telling my friends about my condition, even now, like, it's complicated and I don't go into it. Basically I say that I have half a heart. I think that a lot of us that have Fontan circulation, that's our general way of describing it. We're working on half a heart, and now I've got the added extra of being able to say I have an ICD. So I have half a heart and I have an ICD that'll jumpstart me if I have a heart attack. That's basically how I describe it.
You sound like a car.
Yeah.
A car with half a motor. Well done. Okay.
We have some questions here about siblings, and they're mainly for you, so I'll ask them. How did you support your other child through the journey? And what advice would you give to parents raising children with CHD and other siblings?
I don't know that I want to give advice really to start with. I can really only talk about because it's really different. I can really only talk about my journey and me. So I had Josh, who was not quite two when Jess was born. So as you would know, when you've got a baby and you're having a second baby, that baby is really, really important. After I had Jess, I just wanted to get home to him, and so when Jess was diagnosed, I was really worried about him and did a lot of work to make sure that he was included and that he wasn't shut out by it. I had the most fantastic in-laws, and my mum, they were fantastic with Josh. They would take him at any time. But the beginning of my journey is that Jess' life was going to be very short, so I lived with quite a long period of expecting her to die almost at any time. So part of Josh's journey was preparing our whole family. I guess, for a funeral. And so we had some quite bizarre discussions together about cremation and burial. For one, was one. You know, how do you cremate your baby sister? How do you do that? Well, you don't. You have to bury it. There's got to be a place that you can go. For me, there had to be a place that you went to that was that was a point of connection. And so we even developed that further. We used to go to this, there's a really wild cemetery in West Auckland, and we had dogs, and we'd take the dogs up to the cemetery, and we'd take Josh and Jess up there for lunch. Jess, she thinks it's bizarre. She didn't know, actually.
I've told people since. In fact, I think when I told my husband that we used to go to the cemetery for lunch, he was like quite shocked. I mean, that is such a bizarre thing to do. Quite an Addams Family thing to do.
But that was actually, it was more about Josh as a, you know, as a young child, as a 3, 4, 5 and 6. And we had quite a nice relationship with him. It's great fun. It's like a big part. Yeah. And that was really for him. Then later, when Jess, in retrospect, I think, when Jess was really, really unwell, when she had her first Fontan when she was 6, it was a very, very long journey. She was in hospital for 3 months. And, you know, she ended up, even with the best will in the world and starting, she ended up taking over because she got so sick, and that needed to be our focus. Josh was there. He went to school in the hospital. He was, maybe he was too close. I know he has a phobia, a needle phobia, to this day. And the only way I can put that into perspective now is to say that he was part of our family, and this is also part of his life journey. And there's some things that, now I've got some regrets, but there's some stuff that he is part of his journey to deal with. I hear Jess's regrets too, and again, it's his journey.
I think though, the fact that Josh came and went to the school in the hospital, that was actually very important for both me and him, because I knew that he was there just down the hall, and he knew where I was, and he wasn't in another building on the other side of Auckland. And I knew that I would see him at 2 o'clock or 2:30 or whatever it was every day, and he would bring me something from the cafeteria. There was just, I think that was very important for our relationship, having him there.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a bit of a deep one. How did we both individually, well, respectively, deal with getting prepared for surgery and the potential for it not to go well? You can start.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, this is a really big one for everybody in your family. Our family, my husband, Brett, and I, we really worked together. It was very much a family event for all of us. I did some pre-stuff with the kids. Brett was always really supportive of that, and I've already talked about the visualisation work that I did with Jess. So we did a lot of that. It used to be their bedtime routine. When I was putting them to bed, we'd do the visualisations, which both of them really, really enjoyed. And it, you know, I think that really worked for Jessamy, because I was looking through some old photographs. Even when she was having a catheter, anything to do, we just do the visualisation. And I could actually start it quite quickly.
You're right, it did work. It did work.
Yeah.
It was very, very calming. And to be honest, a lot of it was just because Mum was lying next to me talking to me. And it was Mum's voice that I was hearing. So as I was falling asleep and, you know, going into that state, it was Mum's voice that I was hearing.
As you say that, there's a funny thing. Something's came up to me this morning actually when I was coming in here. Perfume. I remember Jess saying when she was a teenager that she just loved my perfume. It always reminded me, and I always wore the same perfume. I was pretty boring as far as that's concerned. But actually, it was a real connection for her. It was part of actually me being there was that boring same perfume that I wore. The other thing I did with surgeries was I did scrapbooking, some scrapbook work with it way before scrapbooking was a big deal, and worked on, and we've got a scrapbook here that is a very old scrapbook here, but things like collecting photographs and then writing stories, and her writing stories and writing things underneath the pictures were really good for her next surgeries. She would go through the book and she'd read them, and one of the sheets that one of the play therapists, I think, suggested to me was things that I didn't like but I managed.
Such a school teacher. All nicely different coloured sentences, other things I didn't like but I managed. We would sit down and we would write them together. I would speak and Mum would write them. And it would help me for next time that I was going to go into hospital and have surgery. I would read through those with her. Sorry, I butted in.
No, that's good. And then one of the other things that I did when she was a baby, surgery was about our self-preparation and looking after Josh. When she was 6, when she was older, 4, 5 and 6, then it was actually a lot more about preparation for her as well, and reassuring her that we were going to be there even when we weren't there. So another thing that I did for her when she was 6 was I created a card which was with a all the stickers are falling off it now. I've got that, I just bought that here too, and every time each of us had different stickers, and every time we visited her in intensive care, whether she was awake or not, we'd put a sticker on. And I had my stickers and Josh had his stickers, and she was in there for so long I had to go and buy a whole lot more stickers because I didn't have enough stickers. But I think that was on the end of her bed, and she was very, very upset when one of the nurses had a bit of a mishap with one of the lines and it got completely covered in blood and stuff, but you know, it was there. So some quite tangible things like that we did.
Yeah, and I found that, I know it may seem silly, but I didn't know that was happening at the time because I was in intensive care, but then that card is particularly special to me because of the very fact that I know that every sticker was one of them visiting me so that I wasn't by myself. So it was a very nice idea.
And I also went, after she'd been in hospital for that 3 months, which was over Christmas, and it was a really trying time. We had a big family meeting afterwards, so we could talk through some of the regrets that we had, some of the good things that had happened, and some of the regrets, to try and bring some of those to the fore. I don't know that I did that very well, but I did it. And it seemed to... things seemed to settle a bit in our home, in our household after. I think there was, when we got home from hospital, there was a lot of tension. So Jess and I had been in hospital, I think, in the 3 months I'd been up there, all except one night. And Josh and Brett were sort of fending for themselves and looking out for themselves at home. So getting back together was really hard. And I know many, many families face that when they are having to be split for long periods of time, because wherever their surgical procedures are, they're not actually with their home.
Yeah, we were lucky
community.
that we were still in the same city.
Yeah, so that's a hard time. So we sat down, we did that, and I think that was useful. Even looking at some of the where you felt a little bit disgruntled, and working on talking about that a little bit. I don't know that the kids really liked it that much.
I don't know. I don't remember that at all.
Remember,
No.
so it obviously wasn't that traumatic.
So this is post-surgery.
Yeah. Another post-surgical thing.
No, we're not talking about post-surgery.
Okay.
We're talking about getting prepared.
Okay, let's leave that.
Prepared. Should
you?
I?
What do you do?
So what did I do? I think that's changed quite a bit over the years. So when I was younger, a lot of it rested on basically what Mum did to get me prepared, and I guess what she encouraged me to do. I don't really remember getting prepared for surgeries other than the visualization that Mum's been talking about. I remember them very vividly, and yeah, I would, if you're the type of family that may do something like that, I would really highly recommend it. But in later years, so when I had my cardiac conversion in Fontan conversion in 2005, so I was 21, so that was a bit different, and I had a lot of time getting myself mentally prepared for the surgery, and I remember creating a mixtape so that I had all of my most favourite calming, not always calming, songs around me that I could listen to while I was in hospital the first couple of days before surgery. And I also vividly remember, I like to write, and I vividly remember writing a letter to every person in my life that was particularly close to me at that point in time, the night before my surgery. I've never given them those letters, but I wrote them in my journal or whatever it was that I had with me. I know that it sounds very morbid, but it was for me a way of just making sure that I'd said everything that to them that I would have wanted to say. And I think that, you know, you don't want to think that you might die, and you also know that the statistics are that it's unlikely, but I think there is always that fear. I mean, you know, when they're working on your heart, that it's a vital organ that, yeah, it's scary. It's really scary, no matter how old you are, I think. So that's something that I did.
Lots of kids ask that question. I know the conference just recently that has come up, and that giving them that reassurance that the best people are there around them with the highest skills, and you can't get away from the risk, but actually there's a risk when you cross the road, and if you put everything in place around you to make sure that that risk is minimised, you can cross the road safely. And I think that is quite a good analogy for little children, because they know how careful parents and adults around them are when they're crossing the road, and that's something that they can tangibly see. I think that's quite
all
important.
Very well, but I think that no matter when you're an adult and when you're a teenager, no matter how much of that practical, actual information you get and you surround yourself with, even if you're telling yourself these things, there is still that inside worry that only you can deal with yourself. And
it's the same for every parent. It's every person.
And everyone has to find their own individual way of dealing with it. And mine is having music around me and writing. And I think that is always how it will be. I know it's going to be quite different now. I know that I will have surgeries in the future, especially as I have an ICD, and that needs to be changed every, 7 years-ish or whenever. I know it will be quite different for me now because I have a child of my own, and so preparing myself is also going to be preparing my husband and preparing my child for me not being there and the potential for something more serious to go wrong. So it's hard.
But it's life.
Yeah.
That's part of the journey, again.